Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll start with this. A closer look at Beatriz Ferreira's upcoming IBF title defense against France's own Boudersa, who's been around for some years now, been around the block. She's certainly got more fights, more pro experience, and more rounds in the bank than Beatriz. Scheduled for 10 rounds in the women's lightweight division. That says super featherweight. It's not at super featherweight, it's at lightweight. That's where Beatriz Ferreira currently reigns as the newly crowned IBF champion, sporting an unblemished record of 5 wins with no losses, no draws, 2 recorded knockouts, and I think she's about to rack up the third knockout of her professional boxing career over Boudersa, who sports professional record of 23 wins with 2 losses, 2 draws, 4 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 27 professional bouts. She's never been stopped, but there is a first time for everything.
Yes.
Boudersa, who's been busy, she's been active. She already fought 3 times this year. This fight with Beatriz will be her 4th fight this calendar year. She saw action in February, then again in May, then again last month, and she will see action again in Monte Carlo in December. She started off the year dropping a decision to her countrywoman, Rima Ayadi, then rebounded off the loss with Karina Kopinska, racked up another win over Marina Sakharov. So basically, she started off this year losing, and it looks a lot like she's going to finish off this year losing again. Not because she's a bad fighter. She's actually not a bad fighter. I've seen her. She's pretty good. She's not bad. It's just that Beatriz has got that extra, that X factor. Makes me proud to be from Brazil.
You're not Brazilian. You don't even speak Portuguese.
No, but I speak Spanish, and that's pretty close. Beatriz Ferreira is more than just a good fighter or a well-rounded fighter. She's got that extra, that X factor that will carry her to the top. That's part of why she was able to fight for a title and win a title in just 5 professional bouts. That's why she was ready after just 5 fights. And she's ready for Boudersa. Reviewing the footage, watching Boudersa in action earlier this year against her countrywoman, Rima Ayadi, you can see she's got height for the weight, length for the weight, likes to stick and move, box and punch, create space and set traps. More of an outside fighter than an inside fighter. But already you can see what the problems for Licia are going to be, that Beatriz Ferreira is persistent and aggressive, crashing the pocket, letting go of big punches, combinations, and she's strong. That if you were struggling to keep Rima Ayadi out of the pocket, you're definitely going to struggle to keep Beatriz out of the pocket. Rima's a good fighter, but she ain't nowhere near as big a puncher as Beatriz Ferreira. Not as fast, not as athletically gifted as Beatriz Ferreira, not the same kind of combination puncher that Beatriz Ferreira is. And if you struggled with her, you're gonna really struggle with Beatriz. Rima Ayadi beat you. Beatriz is gonna knock you out. I think Beatriz Ferreira is going to knock out Boudersa. She's either gonna force a corner stoppage, force her corner to throw in the towel, or the referee's gonna wave it off. The referee's gonna stop it. Beatriz Ferreira, athletically gifted, is very capable of closing the distance and being defensible while she does it, playing at the angles and changing levels as she barrels forward. And once she's within striking distance, look out. Licia's looking to keep the opponent at bay with 1 and 2 punches at a time behind the jab. I think Beatriz is going to be able to slip past that jab, get under and or around the long jab of Licia as she tries to move and punch, tries to move around. Beatriz is faster on her feet, So even though Licia likes to make herself a moving target,
Beatriz can move too.
she's going to overwhelm her. That is the long and the short of it. It's good of Matchroom to be able to get Beatriz out there one more time before this year is out. Now that she's all done with her amateur stuff in the last Olympic Games, she's free to focus on her pro boxing career in the paid ranks.
She's an action fighter, which boxing needs more of. Less finesse, more ferocity.
And that's what attracts people to combat sports in a very general sense. The violent aspects of it, more than the cerebral ones.
Byproduct of the Mayweather era that I think did a doozy on the boxing market and the boxing community at large, and those who think that the only way to go about fighting a fight is to be a sugarfoot fighter.
What may have defined the previous era doesn't speak to the one that we're in now, and just the history of boxing.
People want blood and guts. They want violence.
Brazil's own Beatriz Ferreira can give them that.
Look for this in December.
Men's welterweight news. Lance Pugmire has a look at the welterweight division, what's going on and what isn't. What are you saving them for now? Welterweights need to unify now. An inspection of the welterweight division is a glance back at the way boxing was before the millions from Saudi triggered a run of anticipated and undisputed showdowns. There were 4 belts in the glamour 147-pound division belonging to 4 different fighters, with little indication beyond lip service that any one of them will be fighting each other in the near future. Unbeaten IBF champion Jaron Ennis is being forced into a mandatory title rematch with Karen Chukadzian on November 9th, a foe Ennis already dominated last year by UD. The homecoming bout in Philadelphia by Ennis may actually herald his welterweight farewell, with Saudi Arabia's power broker Turki El Al-Sheikh intrigued by making a February junior middleweight bout between Ennis and unbeaten Virgil Ortiz. Fighting under Eddie Hearns' Matchroom banner also means the gifted Ennis is not the first choice of other champions, with WBC belt holder Mario Barrios and WBA champion Haymon belonging to Al Haymon's PBC, and newly crowned WBO champion Brian Norman fighting on Bob Arum's Top Rank. This is a weight class where Al Al-Sheikh's Riyadh season is not involved.
But I wish it were.
It's an opportunity to step in and make the fights, and they're failing miserably, Pro Box TV's Paulie Malignaggi said on Thursday's episode of Top Stories. Barrios is assigned a likely one-sided affair on the November 15th undercard of Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul outside of Dallas, where he meets Arizona's Abel Ramos,
Who has lost 3 of his past 5 fights. Stanionis is confronting a mandatory, like Ennis,
waiting out a November 8th purse bid to fight Uzbekistan's Shakram Gayasov, while Norman is sidelined by a hand injury and is supposed to be making up his postponed first defense against Derek Cuevas afterwards.
I would love to see Turki El Al-Sheikh get involved and take more interest in the welterweight division.
But it needs to be said that it's not his responsibility to step in. It's not his responsibility to make those fights happen. No, that responsibility falls on the promoters and the fighters themselves.
If you want to blame somebody for this division and the state of it, blame them.
None of these bouts move the needle. Instead, they reveal how swiftly the division has decreased in significance only a year from boasting Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. with respected veterans Sean Porter, Keith Thurman, and Danny Garcia preceding them. Barrios acknowledged as much at his workout for reporters this week, promising unifications as a route to re-spark interest in the weight class. It's not just a problem in the division, it's a problem in our sport, former 140-pound champion Chris Algieri said. There's a lot of weight classes with a lot of champions. These guys should fight each other. For now, welterweight is in disarray, and it will be for some time unless it gets sorted out.
You know what happened to welterweight is what essentially happened to middleweight. After Canelo Alvarez moved up,
he took all the interest with him. That's essentially what happened at 147, with Terrence Crawford moving up from 147 up to 154.
kinda took all the interest with him.
And what remains, the guys that are still there at 147, they're not interested enough in standing out, in being the last man standing. Without that,
This is what you get.
San Antonio's Mario Barrios, 29, is the ideal welterweight to set the agenda, Algieri said, because Barrios has tasted defeat by taking tough fights against Thurman and unbeaten lightweight champion Gervonta Davis. He's the old head. He's been in with the quality competition, Algieri said. Fighting Ramos on the Paul versus Tyson undercard is not a step in the right direction, but at least Mario Barrios is speaking out about it, so these fights can happen.
You know that I don't even begrudge Mario fighting Abel Ramos on that undercard?
Because if not for that, he probably wouldn't be be fighting, wouldn't be fighting at all before this year is out. The PBC are done this year. You understand that? They've done a grand total of 5 shows this entire calendar year, and they've got nothing else on the calendar for what remains. So if not for this opportunity, Mario probably wouldn't have got a chance to get out there again.
So I'm not even holding this fight against him.
Former welterweight champion Paulie Malignaggi said, Jaron Ennis is the most likely to emerge as the best in class should he opt to remain at 147. And I think he might. Algieri agreed, saying, he's not too dynamic on the mic, but the way he fights is very exciting. He looks for knockouts, is willing to take shots, has superior speed and athleticism, but if he remains at welterweight, he's gonna have to get it the old-fashioned way. Stanionis is no pushover, and Barrios is getting better and better. There's no stars here, but there are live dogs and lots of exciting matchups to be made. It's a shame those fights are not happening. Riyadh Season's interest in Ennis could foil those plans.
If you're gonna say we don't need Riyadh Season, this is your chance here, Malignaggi said. Nothing's moving, guys. This is why you need a power move. It's the same old BS.
Now, what I don't see Paulie and Chris mention is that Matchroom tried to make those fights between Jaron Ennis and those other 3 champions. They tried to do it.
And those guys sandbagged it.
One of the problems I see with boxing today is the fighters and their managers don't want to be realistic about their bargaining power and where they really are in their careers, that none of you guys are stars to be asking for the moon and the stars just to take on a fight, to take on a unification match.
What are your alternatives?
When you reject an offer from Matchroom to unify, what is your alternative?
Fighting Gaiasov? Fighting Cuevas?
Malignaggi said he wonders why, except to chalk it up to the nature of the beast, when promoters would rather retain and protect their champions instead of losing a belt to a rival promoter's fighter. There's not a lot of stars at 147. They're decent fighters, Malignaggi said. It shouldn't be about protecting your reputation. It's about building your reputation. People want to see the fights. Unless the promoters will work together, we're just talking fantasy football. Yes, you need a money injection, but there's lots of pride with the promoters. And if they don't make the fights, it's hard to give these fights support. They are proving the frustration of fans who don't watch boxing. This is a good weight class. What are you saving them for? There's no stars here. Make the fights. By not making the fights, you're the one walking, talking, breathing example of the problems in boxing.
No other promoter in this division besides Matchroom made a push, made an effort to do some unification matches. Not Top Rank, not the PBC, not even with 2 of their own fighters in Mario Barrios and Haymon Stanionis. They didn't bother. They didn't try.
Top Rank didn't try to make any unification matches for Brian Norman. They stuck him in there with Derek Cuevas. Who the hell wants to see Brian Norman versus Derek Cuevas?
The fight got canceled because Brian Norman suffered an injury, but seems like they're gonna reschedule it. You're gonna reschedule that?
Don't make it Turkey LL Sheik's responsibility or Riyadh Season's fault that this division and interest in it is dying on the vine, because the responsibility, if it's anybody's responsibility, it's the promoters, their fighters, and their managers.
Not his.
What's the difference between Al Haymon and Eddie Hearn?
No comment.
Is it just different styles, or?
What you mean?
Well, just in terms of their promotion, like fighting under one compared to the other. What do you like one style?
They both phenomenal people. Great people.
Yeah, and Eddie's great too. I think some people here in America don't give him the time of day or think how De La Hoya said it, Leonard has said it. You stay in England, but you can make a case right now. I think he's the best promoter in combat sports, regardless of combat sport.
Yeah, Eddie Hearn's got a mouthpiece. He do all the talking for you. You don't gotta do too much talking, because he gonna promote you. He gonna say everything that need to be said. All you gotta do is sit back and fight and do what you need to do, and that's one.
That would be a huge difference, right? You don't have to do as much promotion, as many interviews, things like that.
Well, you could say that, I guess.
Yeah, he's like kind of like Don King style, Bob Arum style, as opposed to someone who's behind the scenes.
Jaron Ennis kind of held his tongue there. Didn't want to comment, didn't want to say much about the difference between being promoted by an actual promoter in Eddie Hearn and a wannabe in Al Haymon.
He said they're both phenomenal?
No. Al Haymon didn't bring Jaron Ennis back to Philadelphia like Eddie Hearn brought him back to Philadelphia to fight in front of 14,000 people. That opportunity was there the whole time that Boots was fighting on Showtime under the PBC banner.
Even though he wasn't a PBC fighter.
Not on paper, but he may as well have been. I mean, if you were watching Jaron Ennis fight on Showtime, then you were watching him fight on PBC shows. That's what they were. His then promoter, the now deceased Cameron Duncan.
Rest in peace.
That's where he had Jaron Ennis fighting. He had him fighting on PBC shows. If you caught wind of this fighter and you saw this fighter fight in the last couple of years, that's where he was.
But the whole time he was there, it never clicked, it never registered with either Stefan Espinoza or Al Haymon that maybe they should set something up for Boots in Philly, in his own neck of the woods, where they're hungry for big-time boxing. That never dawned on them?
If it didn't, I don't think it's because of how phenomenal Al Haymon is or the phenomenal job he does with his fighters. Consider that 2 of the 4 champions at this weight are on his side of things. Did he try to make a fight between them?
No.
Let Mario Barrios float away to Netflix, and his guy, Haymon Stanionis, he's on the hook to satisfy a mandatory challenger in Shakram Gayasov. WBA welterweight world title fight between Gayasov and Stanionis might take place in Uzbekistan. Representatives of the Uzbek sports community and promoters are currently in negotiations to make this happen. 1 or 2 days ago, news came down of a potential purse bid for this fight, and I wondered if the PBC had any money.
Were they even gonna bid?
So it would seem that the people on Shakram Gayasov's side of things are more interested in this fight than Stanionis' people. And who are they?
Supposed to be the PBC.
These are preliminary reports, but if it turns out that they're going to ship off Stanionis to Uzbekistan to fight Shakram Gayasov there, you might as well have fought Boots in Philly.
It's a goddamn difference. You didn't want to fight one matchroom fighter in his hometown, you may end up fighting another in his.
Is this another example of the phenomenal job the PBC and Al Haymon do for what are supposed to be their fighters?
I noticed that Boots got really tight-lipped when Ariel Helwani asked him about how Al Haymon compares to Eddie Hearn. Didn't want to say much. Was he staying on code?
That bullshit.
So what are you doing? What are you doing? You're holding off on calling a spade because you don't want to make Al Haymon look bad?
Well, I'll tell you something. He makes himself look bad all by himself without you saying anything. And this is yet another example. Staying on code. What's the code? Pouring sugar on shit? It's what it seems like. So many that don't want to call a spade when it comes to Al Haymon and his methodology.
It's bullshit.
That's right. With Eddie Hearn at the helm of promotion, you ain't gotta say much. You ain't gotta do much except your job. Hold up your end, win the fights, and leave him in charge of the promotion. That ain't the case with Al Haymon because he's a recluse.
You don't do media.
It's literally the exact opposite of what a promoter is supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be out there, in front of those microphones, in front of those cameras, talking up those fighters and talking up those fights. Al Haymon does anything but.
It's a pretty shit promoter.
Nauseum, I see so many, trying to protect his public image, though his works speak for themselves without those people saying anything. If Ennis really thought that this guy were doing a phenomenal job, he wouldn't have went to Matchroom now, would he?
Right.
Set to make another hometown appearance, his second, since pairing up with Matchroom.
Why didn't Al think of that?